Hi, I'm Carson Devitt, and today we're at the Carlisle Theatre. Established in 1939, this theatre has a ton of history, and today we're going to talk about it. Our guest today is Carl Claus. He's the Department Chair of History at Dickinson College. Welcome to your first PCN vlog. And we're here inside the lobby of the Carlisle Theatre. Was it always known as the Carlisle Theatre?
No, it started in May 1939. It opened at the Comerford Theatre, and it showed films almost exclusively. In 1950, it was resold, and that's when it became the Carlisle Theatre. If you look on the outside, there's a very large facade, kind of a salmon color, of some very problematic tiles. It's a very difficult tile, apparently, to work with, and so the paint peels off fairly regularly. And so that's going to be refurbished in the coming years, along with a beautiful marquee out front. The marquee is definitely a product of its age. It shows the late Art Deco style. It's had an unfortunate history because until the last 20 years or so, now we have handicap parking under the marquee. Trucks would try to park there. They would hit the marquee, dent it, and it would have to be refurbished, and a very costly refurbishment at that. The lobby you see around you is changed colors. The original color scheme was blue, gold, and silver, which was very much in the spirit of the times of the late Art Deco. Gold was almost always part of Art Deco coloring, as was silver and black. 1951, probably the biggest event at the Carlisle Theatre, and that was the premiere of Jim Thorpe All-American. Jim Thorpe had been a student at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in the early part of the century, and we had the world premiere of the film here with lots of dignitaries on hand. So the 1950s was both the biggest moment of the Carlisle Theatre to that point, but it was also the beginning of a fairly long decline. As televisions came into people's homes, theaters, cinemas began to slowly decline. In the 1970s, when the big cineplexes with maybe 3 or 5 screens came about, that really hurt. And in 1976, the theater had to close for several weeks because of financial problems. When it reopened, it had a decade of still struggling from one year to the next until it finally closed for what it looked like forever in 1986. Several of the downtown merchants were very concerned about losing the jewel of Carlisle here in the center of the town. And so they got together to start thinking about what could be done. And for the next several years, they began to raise money and think about ideas. And then when the Carlisle Theatre Group, that then became the Carlisle Regional Performing Arts Center, purchased the building for $165,000, the theater reopened, not just as a cinema, although films are present, but also as a concert venue. And that was one of the big money makers in the early 1990s. Now it has its own in-house theater troupe called the Players on High that do musicals and plays. It has summer workshops for children, and it also puts on concerts for local bands, but also tribute bands and things like that from across the country.
You had your students create these posters that tell the history of the Carlisle Theatre. What's some of the history that they shared?
We looked at everything basically from the last 36 years. We unfortunately don't have any information except newspaper articles from the first 50 years of the theater, because when it closed in 1986, those materials just disappeared. But I know the executive director, Ashley Byerts, fairly well, and we found boxes and boxes of materials in the basement. And so in the summer of 2003, with one of my students, Emma Rodriguez, we took those boxes and made them into an archive. And then in the fall of 2003, we have a course called Historical Methodology. And my sophomore students then used that archive that Emma and I put together to begin to tell the story of the last 35 years or so of the Carlisle Theatre. And so what you can see now in the lobby is some of those materials. So they talk about some of the volunteers that made this theater happen in its rejuvenation, revitalization in the early 1990s. Volunteers make this thing run. There's only a few full-time paid employees at the theater. So if it weren't for volunteers and also donors, the theater wouldn't happen. What you can also see on some of the walls is discussion of the renovations, especially the big one in 1997, but also some of the groups that work in here. Part of the display is about the cubiculo, or as we know it, the cube. In 1997, Dickinson and the theater collaborated to create an upstairs black box theater that the college has a long-term lease on that allows our students groups to do smaller productions, but also is a consistent revenue stream for the theater. The theater is much bigger than the auditorium and the lobby that you see now. Properties to one side are also retail spaces. The first one being the Singer Sewing Machine Company and Toby's Dress Shop, but it's been restaurants and all kinds of other things over the years. There's also display in here. Students were obviously fascinated about what kind of performances were being put on in the 1990s and early 2000s. And so they went through and they looked at revenue and ticket sales and did top 10 lists for movies and for concert performances. And any of you fans of Kevin Bacon, the Bacon brothers performed here many times, and 3, I think, of the top 10 shows in the first 20 years were the Bacon brothers performances. But they also had B.B. King, the Letterman, the Kingston Trios, and of course Celtic groups do particularly well here at the Carlisle Theatre. Was
there any other theaters in existence whenever the Carlisle Theatre opened?
Yeah, the Carlisle Theatre was one of 3 at the time, but it's one of a kind really. To my knowledge, in the Mid-State and certainly in Carlisle. One, it's the beautiful Art Deco that just can't be done. It's way too expensive to produce something like that today. But also just the size and the scope. This is by far the largest building. It was the largest construction project in central Pennsylvania when it opened in 1939. The auditorium that we'll be going into shortly is cavernous. We just don't see places like that in the Mid-State. And that really allows the Carlisle Theatre to do a lot of things that others don't, to put on live theater concerts and seat almost 1,000 people. So its importance to the community as a resource for entertainment, but also the knock-on effects that it has for local merchants. When there's a show in the evening, like School of Rock, which is going to be performed, we have other restaurants. If people are coming from a show, they might go to the Comfort Suites and have a hotel room for the night. So there's an economic vitality that comes from the theater that goes beyond the theater. It really stretches into the rest of Carlisle as well.
Before we enter the theater, my favorite part of any movie theater is the concession stand. Did they have one in the early years of the theater?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have records from the first 50 years of the theater, but we do from its reopening in '93 and a little bit before that. So you can see you have all the regular concessions, your sodas, your candies, and wonderful fresh popcorn that they pop for every show. Interestingly, when they were beginning to think about the reopening in the early 90s, many of the board members were arguing about whether they should allow concessions. They were worried about popcorn all over the floor, the spilling of the soda. Chewing gum was a big issue, not wanting it to be stuck under seats and whatnot. But as you see, they kind of overcome that and realize that everybody wants a little popcorn, a soda, and maybe some candy when they come see a concert or a show.
So Carl, now we're in the actual auditorium itself. Tell us, what would you see if you came here today?
Well, you see we've got about 900, just over 900 seats. So full capacity for bigger concerts. We also have a stage in front of us where the concerts would be held. They also have main stage productions, and there's also a big video screen up there for their film series, the Hollywood on High series. So there's all kinds of events in here, as well as civic events. Cantate Carlisle has events in here. The Carlisle Band, Town Band has events in here. So it's a really diversified set of entertainment for visitors.
And along the back here, we see a balcony. What was that for?
So the balcony originally, when it opened in May 1939, was for the African American population. It was unfortunately segregated until 1961. So any African American residents or viewers would have to sit in the balcony, where they also had their own restroom and water fountain. And then after 1961, it was supposed to be integrated, and the balcony is now for anyone's use.
One of the most notable features when you walk in the auditorium is the stage that we're standing on. And back in 1939, it was the Comerford Theatre.
Correct.
Did it still look the same?
No, very different. The Comerford was one of 3 cinemas here within a block in central Carlisle. And so it was mostly just showing movies. So they didn't need a big stage. When it became the Carlisle Theatre in 1950, it was still a cinema. But after it reopened in the early 90s, they started wanting to do more stage productions. So the big renovation in 1997 increased the size of the stage so you could have in-house plays, in-house musicals, but also larger band concerts. Because in the very early days after it reopened, a lot of the concerts in here would be taking place outside of the theater to raise money for the theater. And so if we look at the first 20 years of concerts after the theater reopened in 1993, only one of those top 10 shows actually happened in the 1990s. It was only after 1997 you could have a full stage production, lighting, and better music. And so this stage is only a little less than 30 years old in this kind of size and configuration.
And surrounding the stage are these pretty pieces of wall art. Is that considered Art Deco as well?
Yes. So just like we were saying earlier, we have these different elements that were preserved throughout the now 86 years of the theater's history to try to trace it back to its 1939 origins when it was known as the Jewel of Carlisle, because this late Art Deco style was a very elaborate style.
So, Carl, we've been talking a lot about the Carlisle Theater's history, but let's talk about it today. What are some of the most popular shows or reasons that people come here?
Concerts probably sell the most tickets. Almost this entire auditorium would be filled on a concert. And those are things like tribute bands for Led Zeppelin or the Beatles or AC/DC or something like that, or a country act. But also local artists will perform in here as well. So they get a lot of friends and family that come in as well. Other shows that are popular, some of the musicals are really popular. School of Rock is opening in about a week and a half from the time we're filming that. Anything that has kind of a kids component will bring in adults plus kids, plus a lot of the actors are kids, so their families will come, and so those are quite popular. Some that have been very consistently popular over the last 30 years is Rocky Horror Picture Show and those kind of cult classics, and then also anything that's Celtic. Celtic concerts sell particularly well in the mid-state. So those are two things that have shown a great deal of vitality over the last 35 years.
Personally, I'm a fan of Rocky Horror Picture Show, so I can totally see that being a thing here. Do you have any tips for our audience if they want to come into the Carlisle Theater? What would you suggest?
Well, if you come for Rocky Horror, you don't have to bring your own things to throw. You can buy goodie bags in the lobby and you'll be all set for the stage performance. If you don't know how Rocky Horror Picture Show goes, come to a performance here. Other things to check out, carlisletheatre.org. That's theater with a T-R-E instead of T-E-R. carlisletheatre.org. You can look at their shows in the Hollywood on High film series. You can look at their upcoming concerts. You can look at the Players on High, their in-house acting troupe. But you can also push the donate button. They're about $150,000 short of $2.5 million grant to refurbish this, get new seats, lighting, repair the roof, HVAC, kind of all those things that we don't necessarily see, but really modernizing it to bring the 1930s grandeur into the 21st century technology.
Well, thank you very much for being here today.
My pleasure.
And thank you guys so much for watching PCN talk about the history of the Carlisle Theater.